Yeah, thank you for having me. And in full disclosure, I've got a little bit of a cold, so hopefully my voice does not give out during this, but I am very passionate about this topic, as many people in attendance today probably are aware. Um, so like Eileen said, my name is Katie Wright. I'm the director of the VEDS Movement, and I'll be talking about emergency planning. And this presentation is really guided by my own experience. So there might be things that I'm missing or not aware of. The context of this presentation, just so that you know, I have VEDS, which stands for vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I think you've heard a lot about today. And VEDS is associated with life-threatening emergencies, including ruptures of the arteries in the aorta, dissections of those vessels, as well as hollow organ ruptures like the bowels, lung collapse, and more. So this is the context in which I come to this presentation today. In December of 2017, just a few months after my diagnosis of VEDS was made at the age of 28 years old, I woke up at around 2:30 in the morning and went to my kitchen to get a glass of water. When I came back from my kitchen and was walking into my bedroom, I collapsed. The room was spinning. I could not feel my left leg from the waist down. I could not move it. If I tried to move it, it just kind of flopped. I call it like a spaghetti limb. And I knew immediately that I was having a stroke. What I now know is that I had a transient ischemic attack or mini stroke, because this resolved on its own, but it was a life-threatening situation and I needed to get to the emergency room. Now, I thought I had a well thought out emergency plan. After my VEDS diagnosis, I got a medical ID. I think at this time I was still wearing a necklace. I had a booklet from the University of Washington with lots of information about VEDS in it, and I carried it everywhere with me. And in full disclosure, I lived alone and I was comfortable with that, and I still am. But when this happened, it was 2:30 in the morning, and I was about 10 to 15 feet away from my phone to call 911. I had to crawl to my nightstand in this kind of situation and pull the phone down by the charging cable and attempt to call 911. I could not, like, the connection between like my brain and my hand was not working right. So when I tried to dial 911, first I accidentally got to texting somehow, and I was like, no, that's not what I'm trying to do. I called 941 a couple times, and finally I was able to call 911. Luckily, I was able to speak and tell them that I needed an ambulance and that I was having a stroke. Like I said, I thought I had a well thought out emergency plan, but when I had this TIA in the middle of the night, I could not get to my phone easily. I had trouble dialing 911. I do have an iPhone, and in full disclosure, I'm an immersive learner, and my iPhone was in Swedish because I was learning Swedish at the time. In this kind of emergent situation, I was not confident about my ability to remember the Swedish numbers for 911. And so I was fighting with the phone to dial it. My neighbor had an extra key, which was great. And I told the dispatch officer that she had it, but I heard the first responders from my bedroom knock on my door, try the door, and say, oh, the door's locked. And I felt like I had to crawl to the front door and let them in, which I did. And when they came inside, I had to tell them where my emergency book was. It wasn't easily accessible to them. And it was something that I guess I had always imagined that I would have the ability to hand it to them. So this situation really made me think about a lot of what ifs that I hadn't thought about before, and made me really start rethinking my plan. So I thought about what ifs. What if I had been unable to speak? What if I couldn't reach the phone at all? What if I couldn't tell them that I had VEDS? What if I wasn't conscious when they arrived? There were a lot of what ifs, and I think the what ifs are really scary. But when I think about emergency planning, I think for me, it has been better to address the what ifs head on ahead of time so that I can be prepared for all of these things, build out my plan accordingly, and then put it aside and not have to think about it until these things maybe never even happen. My initial solutions in 2017 were to apply for something called a premise file or a premise alert program. This is something that exists, I believe, in a lot of areas, You can apply for this premise alert program. I think you contact your first responders to figure out how to do it, but basically it's an alert that will tell first responders that someone at your address has vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or Marfan syndrome or Loeys-Dietz or whatever condition you're affected by. And there's a whole application process, but this could be really helpful for you if you're able to get one of these. It will kind of give the first responders a heads up. Hey, someone at this address has this, and this is what it means. Now, my premise file at the time was denied. So in a moment of rage, I built this, this is the picture of the first copy of my door sign that I made for my front door, because in that rage, I was like, well, if somebody shows up here, by golly, they're going to know what I have, and I'm going to make it obvious to everybody. May not be the best option for you, but for me, it made me feel better. I got a key box so that if the situation happened again with the key, I could just tell the the dispatch officer or the first responders what the code was to the key box. My mom got me an Apple Watch to pair with my iPhone, because after this event, I became very fearful to be anywhere without my phone in my hand, in my pocket, within reach. I became fearful of taking a shower and not being able to get to it in case something happened in the shower. I mean, there was this period of elevated fear for sure after this event. And having the Apple Watch has really allowed me to move freely away from my phone and know that I can still call 911 on my phone, or on my watch, I mean, and it has the feature where if I fall, it detects it and it will call 911 for me, which really put me at ease. I was advised that I should have an emergency bracelet and not necessarily a necklace, because they tend to look for the bracelets first. That's something the first responders told me. I developed a phone tree to make sure that, I wasn't having to contact my loved ones to tell them everything. I basically set up a tree where one person was told, and then they told, they had the tree. They knew who they were supposed to call. And I started talking to first responders in my area, and I found out that first responders really like to know about this information before an emergency happens. Every fire station I've been to talk to about VEDS has been very receptive to the information. They want to know about it. They don't want to come in blind to a situation and not know that something like this exists. So I really encourage you to reach out to your first responders near you. Meet the people who would be showing up to your house in an emergency. After this, I also found out there was a shortcut on my phone that I didn't know existed. On an iPhone, if you hit the button on the side 5 times very quickly, it calls 911 for you. So I didn't actually have to fight with the buttons. I had no idea. Last year, a few years after this TIA, my spleen ruptured spontaneously. It was almost a year ago. It's going to be a year on Monday. And I knew the symptoms of this emergency. I didn't know it was my spleen, but I knew I was internally bleeding. It was sudden onset of pain. I started feeling like a cold sweat, and I just knew something was wrong. I called 911 immediately, told them I had VEDS and that I needed an ambulance, and told them quite frankly that I thought I was internally bleeding. I called my vascular surgeon, a member of my care team, who alerted the hospital, and then talked to the first responders on the phone when they arrived. So everything just kind of fell into place there. My vascular surgeon, had called the hospital, and her resident was there. And when I arrived at the hospital via ambulance, the resident was there to welcome me and make sure I got that CTA scan. When there was a long wait for the CTA, they just kept checking in. Hey, when is she going to be getting into that CTA? She really needs that CTA. And it allowed me to have an advocate there in that situation. Ultimately, the CTA revealed that I had internal bleeding. I was admitted, and I had a splenic artery embolization a couple days later after we found the source of the bleeding. But this is me on the right after I was able to sit up in bed for the first time after my surgery and after all of this went down. And I think that this event, to me, really speaks to a well-organized care team and a well thought out plan. It really went much more smoothly than when I had the TIA in 2017. So the basics: establish a care team and use it. When I was first diagnosed with VEDS, I got my vascular surgeon's cell phone number and I was afraid to use it. I think I called her from the emergency room and said, hey, by the way, I'm sitting in the waiting room. I had a TIA, I think. And she's like, why are you in the waiting room? And why am I just finding out about this now? You know, she gave me that cell phone number for a reason. Don't be afraid to use it. If your doctor gives you their cell phone number and you're having an emergency, use it. They can often call the hospital, alert them to what's going on, and they can be a big advocate for you. Find those solutions to the what ifs. That has really helped me think about the what ifs now so that I don't have to think about them later. And that's all about being prepared for emergencies beforehand. Talk to your local responders, keep your emergency information on hand, and get a bracelet, I think is really important. And then importantly, know the signs of an emergency associated with your condition. In between this period of time in 2019, I had a small artery rupture that I did not recognize the signs of. And retrospectively, it was pretty obvious. So know the signs of an emergency associated with your condition, whatever your condition is, so that you can be prepared for that. There is a patient care coordination note that the Marfan Foundation has put together for VEDS, Marfan syndrome, and Loeys-Dietz syndrome. I've put it on a QR code here so you can scan it on your phone if you'd like. I'll leave it up here for a second. But these are instructions that you can give your doctor to put that patient care coordination note in Epic. This is something that if your doctor puts it in and the hospital that you go to in an emergency is part of that same system, then they should be able to see that patient care coordination note, and the instructions in here have language for what it should say depending on the condition that you have, and your doctor can certainly personalize that, but that could be critical to triage staff at the emergency room. And then there are emergency preparedness kits and cards on each of the Marfan Foundation's respective websites, the marfan.org, the VEDSmovement.org, and loeysdietz.org. So I've put these on QR codes as well because I'm all about QR codes in 2022. But these are really, really helpful kits and things to have on you. It can help you have this little wallet card for your wallet so that it's really easily accessible in an emergency and you're not carrying a big old packet. So I think I'm going to stop there. I'm going to leave this up for a second if that's okay, Eileen, if people want to scan it.
Excellent. I love it.
Happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you. That was really, really great. Oh, you know what? Here's a question that's going to give you a chance to make a plug, Katie. How do you get a medical alert bracelet?
Oh my goodness. So
perfect question.
That is the perfect question. So for VEDS, the VEDS movement is offering free medical IDs for people who have a confirmed genetic diagnosis of vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. You can go to the VEDSmovement.org and find that. If there's a click, that probably the easiest way is to just go to our website, the VEDSmovement.org, and the banner image on the top, you can click through and you'll see a free medical ID right there, and just click on that. For the other conditions, I'm not sure if the Marfan Foundation or the Loeys-Dietz Syndrome Foundation offers free medical IDs yet, but I use Road ID. I know there's other companies like Sticky J that the Marfan Foundation has a partnership with. You can just Google medical ID bracelet and find probably a company that has options that you like.
Exactly. And Stephanie, thank you. She put the link to the VEDS bracelets in the chat. So that was perfect. Yeah, and I think the important thing for the medical ID bracelets is to, there are tons of choices, like Katie said, but to put not only what your diagnosis is, because think that the ER person or the EMT might not know what Marfan or Loeys-Dietz is, but to put what you're at risk of and your medications, and you can talk to your doctor about what to put on there. So absolutely.
And I think we have guidelines on our websites as well about recommendations.
Exactly. Lots of emergency information there for you. Oh, and somebody is saying there's pretty medical alert bracelets on Etsy as well. So you can be creative too. So anyway, Katie, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience and what you learned and a lot of those solutions. I know that'll be handy for everybody here. So thank you so much.